Joining BYU Sports Nation, in fact, making his long-anticipated BYUSN debut. As I mentioned, the last man to quarterback a BYU team that finished the season ranked. Riley Nelson. Riley, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on, fellas.
We talked at Media Day. You asked me a very fair question, which was, why don't we have any offensive analysts on BYU Sports Nation? So here we are,
Besides
Riley.
Blaine Fella.
Are you ready to restore order to what has been dominated by defense?
Yes, I am. And you're right. You're right to mention Blaine. I know Blaine's been on there. But I know you guys were in serious negotiations to lure Steve Young away from ESPN. And once those fell through, I figured, hey, I might not be a good enough substitute, but at least I can fill some airtime.
What do you bring to the table that's better than, say, Brian Keel, David Nixon, and Brian Logan?
Those guys, being on the defensive end of this, it's see ball, run ball, tackle ball. It's much more of a dance. There's elegance and rhythm and so much more to offer, from the offensive perspective. So I will say, not to offend those guys, but let's be honest, it's the truth. It's some class and elegance and maybe some intelligence to the program.
They're offended easily, so it will be fun to see what the aftermath is.
And I see those guys on a regular basis. So. I think I can still outrun them. The good thing about that is, as I'm getting older, they're getting older too. So, I can keep those few yards ahead of them. They won't catch me.
Riley Nelson making some compelling arguments right now on BYU Sports Nation. I know you saw those guys at Media Day and a number of other guys that came back for 4 decades of dominance. How was that experience for you in Studio A?
Media Day was a absolute great experience. It was good to, see all those guys. I got to meet a lot of them over the course of my career, kind of on an individual basis as they'd come back and come to games or they'd drop in the summer. But that was the first time that there had been a collection all in one spot. So it was great to see all those old alumni who, had been so good and kind to mentor me during my playing career. And now that we're all of our careers are over and alumni to be able to talk and share in those memories and all be in one place. And then it was good to see Coach. And then probably the funnest thing for me was I hadn't seen, I ran into a few of the guys in the winter. I was down there at BYU and was able to talk to some of the guys, but to be able to talk to the current players, see how summer was going, get a feel for, where they felt like they were at, what where they can improve going into camp, because you really want to ramp up and be at your best going into camp. A lot of guys want to, it's been a long, hard summer, a lot of conditioning and lifting. But that being said, talking with those guys, all their minds were right, and I'm jazzed up and excited for the season.
Let's ask you our Twitter question. What's the greatest quarterback-running back combo in BYU history?
All right, so I knew I was going to be on the show today, and I follow you guys on Twitter, so I came prepared with this, all right? A lot of these guys are my friends, and so I'm not going to give you a ranking, but I will give you my categorized opinion, all right?
Okay.
All right, so here we go. So the
Way
best
to sidestep the rush.
Exactly. Pretty good at that. Ducking under. But best single season, Doman and Staley, by far. You look at just the sheer production and then just entertainment value, right? I'd probably say the best championship duo was Heimuli and Bosco,
okay.
Of course, the national championship. And then this is a tough one for me. But the best career duo between Hall and Unga and Brown and Beck. People say that, Hall ended up with most wins, most touchdown passes. Harvey was the career rushing holder, but Curtis was before. I feel like Hall and Unga were version 2.0 of Brown and Beck. So where do you give it? Do you give it to the current leaders, on the career standings, or do you give it to the Trailblazers, that came right before them? So that's kind of my list right there. I don't know. How does that stack up against your guys's?
It's interesting because we decided we didn't specify like you did, but I said Doman, Staley, and then Spencer said Unga and Hall.
Now here's the thing, Riley, about Curtis Brown and John Beck. They were the tandem to bring BYU back into the winning kind of atmosphere, and so that plays into their argument as well.
And I love that 2.0. I think you're spot on them.
Well, Well, no question. Let's think about it. Had, the early part of, when Max and Harvey stepped in, Coach Mendenhall kind of had the program humming. You think if Curtis and John would have been in that similar situation, their career numbers probably would have ended up around Max's and Harvey's, if not maybe have surpassed them. So it's a hard balancing act. That's why I'm not going to put my foot down. I just appreciate both those duos for, the great time they had at BYU.
And most of the time, you can look at a good quarterback-running back duo, and it's BYU, so they've had great tight ends, but you can point at a good tight end that maybe blocks well and creates opportunities on the edges for running backs and quarterbacks to have success. I look at the 96 team, obviously Lewis and Mealy. I look at the Doman Staley team. Doug Jolly. I look at Johnny Harleen and Dennis Pitta. There's something to that, having a good tight end to helping the quarterback out and helping the running back out, right?
Oh, no question. Those were great teams, and you can see why they were great teams because they had exceptional players at all of those positions, all of which filled a role. The running backs were able to get you that third and short, or were able to get you those critical third down conversions. Those tight ends were able to take advantage of the zones on the outside, and then a few of them, had outside threats. I don't know much about the 96 team, what weapons they had on the outside, but you look at John had Todd Watkins there his junior year. And then, McKay kind of filled that role, that deep threat a little bit his senior year. Of course, Max had Austin. So, there was a reason that those teams all won 10, 11, 12, in 96 case, 14 games.
Riley, you mentioned talking to some of the guys that are now approaching what is a gauntlet of a schedule in 2015, particularly in September. They are led by quite the duo in Taysom Hill and Jamal Williams. Where do those guys stack up, or where will they stack up when all is said and done against some of the greatest duos in history?
I labeled those guys the most exciting potential duo. So, my dad used to have a T-shirt that said, "The older I get, the better I was." So, because Taysom and Jamal are so fresh, and we have these when we think of those, that Staley against Utah, Doman, pitching it like 2 yards from the sideline, and Staley tiptoeing the sideline for 60 yards for the go-ahead. Like that's entered BYU lore. Taysom and Jamal are too fresh. Taysom, of course, you have the hurdle, and you've got some other plays from Jamal that are kind of in the beginnings of that, but I'm not going to put anything past them. I agree with Jamal's mama that, they've definitely have the potential and they have it in them. Needless to say, it's always nice to be excited about the upcoming season. I'm very excited and am anxious to see what product they put out on the field this year.
2012, you have freshman Taysom Hill off of a mission. He comes in, Wildcat a little bit, starts a couple games when you were hurt. Then you look at Jamal Williams, emerged for an injured Michael Elisa for the most rushing yards for freshman BYU history. How have those guys grown since you played with them in 2012?
I'd say, Jamal has grown physically. Jamal was a young high school kid. He was 17. I think he turned 17 like on campus. Like he was closer to 17 than he was to 18 when he was out there playing as a freshman. Taysom has to me, shaken off that mission rust. He's become a wily veteran. He's become a guy who's seen it all. He had it all. Taysom, except for some fine tuning, in his passing game and things like that. But everything you're seeing today, we saw in somewhat of a little bit more raw form back in 2012, and that was because the guy was, 6-7 months off his mission. But Taysom, I think, is biggest. He's grown in leadership, and he's embraced that role as the quarterback for BYU. And then Jamal has grown physically, and then also just in his ability to produce yards in those tough situations. For me, the mark of a great running back is the whole stadium it's 3rd and 3. The whole stadium knows you're turning handing the ball off to a guy, and he can still get it. And I think Jamal's been able to show that. And I wish for both of them, you mentioned 2012, I had an experience with some injuries. So my biggest hope, there's one thing I want to see out of this season, and that's that both those guys get the chance to finish out the season the way they should, and that's healthy. and the wins and losses will fall where they may.
Former BYU quarterback Riley Nelson on BYU Sports Nation making his debut on the show. Riley, let's talk about realistic expectations for BYU football in terms of wins and losses this year. I know as a former player, and it's hard to kind of differentiate between, well, I believe that we can win every game, and then you have to put on the analyst mode. But let's get you to try and go the analyst mode. Wins, losses, where do you see BYU in 2015?
It is so hard, and I am wholeheartedly and with every fiber of my soul against preseason rankings because they mean nothing and they are so erroneous. I think Sporting News did an analysis over the last 10 years. They've hit on like 7%. So they have like a 7% success rate with preseason polls. So it's hard to say. But that being said, my expectations for this team, first of all, I don't look at any game on the schedule and think that's going to be an uphill battle. I think, I look at games and there's like swing games. We definitely have some formidable opponents, a lot of those being on the road, but I don't see any of those programs. Like, for example, if we were walking into the Horseshoe in week 4 against Ohio State, that might be one where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't put money down on that. But every game on the schedule this year, you look at the state of these programs. Yeah, we're going to be at Michigan. Yeah, we're going to be at Nebraska. Yeah, we're going to be at UCLA, hosting Boise State and all those things. But there's a lot of question marks around those programs. In fact, I'd say, I'd argue that Boise State's probably, of those first 4, is the most formidable team coming back as far as identity and knowing what they have. But, I do not think a 10-win season is out of the question. That's kind of, I don't want to say expecting because, as alumni, I want the best for my alma mater, and I want to see these guys who are my friends and ex-teammates win every game. But I do not think a 10-win season is out of the question.
Has the word grit followed you post BYU since it became synonymous with your name?
Thank you, Bronco Mendenhall.
Hey, man, I'll take it. That's not a bad thing to be known for. I know some people out there in the Twitter sphere have kind of made that, tried to turn it into a joke and almost a negative thing. But man, I'll take it. If that's one, if I'm known for being a guy who put it out there for the team. But has it followed me? Yeah, a little bit. I'll say my current boss brought it up in my interview when I interviewed for my job here, and it's something that people in the business world, especially I'm in sales right now, and you take a lot of no's and you got to kind of take your lumps and beatings and just kind of continue on. And to me, that's kind of what grit means a little bit. So it has. I don't hear it as much. I think Coach Mendenhall liked that term a lot more than people outside of him do. But hey, man, I'll take it.
Now, listen, when there is a movie called True Grit with John Wayne in it, you should definitely feel good about the word grit.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, there's no negative. John Wayne was, and then the remake wasn't as good, but that wasn't a bad movie either.
Jeff Bridges, not bad.
Yep.
Riley, great to talk to you, man. Let's do this again soon, huh?
Okay, thanks so much for having me on, guys. And yeah, we'll be on. We'll try and make this a regular thing. I'll give Blaine some support on the offensive side.